Tuesday, May 10th. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. Moving on to the next order of business is approval of the minutes from May 25th, 2022. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any amendments or changes to the motions that were submitted or to the minutes that were submitted? No? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Next order of business is for Selectmen update, and I will share my screen here for a minute. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Right. Okay, just to give the board and the public an update, obviously the budget referendum is set for Tuesday, May 17th. The total budget is $91.4 million. This represents a 3.3% increase and a possible tax increase of 1.63%. That decision will be made by the Board of Finance the day after the budget referendum where they set the mill rate. And as we've talked about before, this budget prioritizes public safety and health, slows the growth of the town operating budget, and prepares for future debt service needs. It's available on the town website. Also want to highlight that you can vote by absentee ballot. Those are still available in the town clerk's office, so please reach out to that office. And also in person, and as usual, traditional polling locations. District 1 votes at Polson Middle School. Polls are open from 6 a.m. till 8 p.m. and District 2 votes at Brown Intermediate School. And just so people know, the schools will be having a remote learning day on the day of the referendum. So there'll be plenty of parking available to residents as they go in to vote for the budget. Update on the referendum projects, the Madison School Renewal Plan, the Jansen property. We are tentatively scheduled to close tomorrow for that. And it's going to be just a virtual closing to acquire the property. So we're waiting on a final few items to see if we can get those resolved for tomorrow. The school building committee started meeting and they're interviewing architects. I know I bumped into Al yesterday at the town hall. So one of the things I'll be reaching out to the board is kind of selecting a permanent liaison for the Board of Selectmen to the building committee. Academy, we received the applications for the 2 committees that closed on Friday. So we'll start that interviewing process. The town received a $4 million state bonding award for Academy. And we're also applying for other grants. And one of those you'll be voting on today that has to do with a brownfields grant through DECD. So that's going to be continued to be going forthcoming as we apply for different grant opportunities. Island Avenue, if you recall, I updated you that there was an issue about the portable units and some sort of zoning approval for that had never really been followed up on the town's end. So we've completed that process now through planning and zoning because the buyer requested it because they want to keep those as, attached to the building. That did finally get completed last week. And so now we're just working on a more formal closing date. I'm assuming people would like to do something more ceremonial for this, just because it is a big deal, obviously. It's a symbolic thing for the town to be turning over Island Avenue. So once I get a better handle on dates, I will reach out to the board too to see if any interest in attending that and make sure that we can have a good attendance in that. But we're working on that right now. And then one other thing I just wanted to highlight that will be coming up at a later meeting because we talked about it, I think 2 meetings ago. That's the Fireman's pension plan update. We needed to get the pension advisor involved as well as our labor council, just because it requires revisions to the actual pension plan. So then we talked about kind of high level, I think, at our last meeting. So we'll be having a draft for the board to review what the actual changes would be to the plan. So that is it from my update. With that, I turn it over to Any, sorry, getting my screens organized here. If there's any comments or updates, liaison updates from board members.
Peggy, I'll go first. The school building committee, I've stumbled into both their meetings since the board met 2 weeks ago. The building committee has managed to meet twice. It's a very efficient committee. They're all getting along. The chairman is keeping the meetings very targeted, very focused, and very productive. And so they're getting ready now to actually interview architects. There were quite a number of submissions, and at last night's meeting, the committee narrowed it down to a more manageable number to actually conduct in-person interviews. I don't consider myself to be the liaison to this school building committee. I just happened to stumble into the first two meetings, so I'm glad we will have a discussion about who wants to take that on permanently.
Okay, great. Any other updates from Selectmen?
I would just add two things. First of all, in P&Z, a lot is going on with potential housing options. I'm sure you've been reading about a lot of it, but just this weekend, we heard that the Barberry Farm is being negotiated with the buyer. And you know about the Wellington, obviously the Bradley's going up, but there are a lot of projects, potential projects around town at all different stages of work with the planning and zoning. And then the other thing is, I just want to really put a request out to our citizens. We really are desperate to get some new blood on planning and zoning. We are down, we're supposed to have 12. I think it's 9 members and 3 alternates. We're now down at 5. I'm hearing there's potential, one more resignation potentially in the works. So we really do need to really put a call out to the town to really help us. It'd be great if somebody with some experience would put, anybody we would definitely talk to, obviously, but someone with some experience, because I think that if we look at the experience of the 5 people on, it's really pretty limited. And I know Aaron's been working really hard to bring them up as far as educating them, Aaron Mannix. But again, just to request that if anyone's interested, please reach out to either the selectman's office, or you can call either party's head. But we really, really need to put an effort to get that number up on where it needs to be.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Yep, Bruce. You're muted, Bruce. You're on mute. Still muted. There you go.
Like I said, I was.
Thanks for the update, Bruce.
I'm having an argument with my computer this morning, and I'm losing. I want to thank everybody who has written the Board of Selectmen on their feelings about this issue of short-term rentals. We have asked for people to be engaged and to provide us with their opinions, and we're hearing from basically all sides of the conversation. And I think that will go a long way to informing the discussion that we have in the coming weeks. So thank you for that. This weekend we had a tree come down on Route 79, and I know, Peggy, you've said in the past that one of the biggest sources of calls from citizens in town has to do with trees. And I'm wondering if we couldn't get from the state their schedule and plan for maintaining the state roads and the trees on the state roads, something that we could publish so that people would at least see that there's a plan. And I'm hoping that there is a plan. So I'll just throw that out there.
We do get notification of when they're doing work. I don't know if we get specifics. Lauren would know. But we do get notification when they're going to be doing work in Madison. Okay, any other comments or board members?
Board of Ed and Madison Youth and Family Services are both this evening. So in advance of this meeting, so it is what it is.
Okay, great. All right, with that, we'll move on to citizens' comments. And I know that, we have some interest, obviously, in one of the agenda items later about short-term rentals. And we did receive a lot of public comments submitted to us. And today's is just a discussion again. And I want to highlight that if the board were to go down any kind of policy path on short-term rentals, there would also be a public hearing associated with that. And then anything that's submitted by email goes into the public record and the meeting minutes. Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, if they submitted it as wanting it as part of the meeting minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
And Aaron had kind of collated them all for you into one packet. And so that will be attached to the minutes of this meeting.
Okay. So, with that, I'm not familiar with all the attendees, but if just in the interest of time, if we could keep any public comment to 2 minutes from the public, if it's relating to short-term, well, any topic, obviously, because we have a lot to get through today. We also have our charter review discussion, which is an important one. So with that, I will ask for any citizens' comments. Lauren.
No one is raising their hand.
Oh,
Oh,
okay,
here we go.
Oh, okay.
We had a couple. Can you please state your name and address for the record?
I think this is me. Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Chris Canay on 9 Middle Beach Road in Madison.
Go ahead.
I spoke at the last meeting, but just kind of here to quickly reiterate why I think that we should continue to allow the shorter term rentals. My quick points are I was born here, just back from 30 years away. And during those 30, and am now just bought a home with a guest cottage to rent, to pay taxes, property taxes. And my ability to rent down here short term during that 30 years allowed me to keep my toe in my heart here in Madison and visit family and so forth. If the limit had been 30 days and I had to pay upwards of $30K to do it, that would have been really hard. And I think we need to consider how making a limit of 30 days is really not going to be for locals and bringing in family and friends anymore. It's going to bring in only the elite outsiders who can afford to pay massive amounts of money to stay for 30 days. Certainly all the locals coming in for weekends and so forth will be barred from doing that. And I think since the issue is the quality of renters and not really the time someone stays, we should address the quality with things like stringent lease issues, like you have to be 27 to rent mine, parties are prohibited. And then possibly even a noise ordinance, ways that we can support our residents in using their properties to help pay their taxes rather than punitively, oppressing that right, while just giving those who can afford lots of money making those the folks that rent here, and rather than people coming home like me. So I think I've hit my 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other hands raised?
Got a list now.
Go
Hi,
ahead.
good morning. It's Christina Siwi of 32 Texas Road. And I wanted to jump on as well. I did write in a letter concerning the short-term rental limitation. And I just want to second what the other homeowner just said is, one, a lot of the people that have rented from us have been grandparents. One story in particular, last summer, it was actually their son was getting treated for cancer close by, and they couldn't stay in the same home, and they couldn't afford that to rent for a month. They needed it for 2 weeks so that they can be there for his treatment. And I unfortunately at that time did not have space, but my neighbor right down the street did, and we were able to allow that family the ability to be there for their son and help out his grandparents with his children. So I think those are the stories that I know for me as an owner that I rented out before. Those are the people that I've been able to help. I second it also with, you cannot guarantee when you're renting to somebody for $30,000 or $40,000. I'm sure all of us have friends who have homes in the Hamptons. It brings in a lot of people. So you do need you know, I think, like we were saying, like the noise ordinance or the age limitation to be brought in to help us kind of discern. I can also say I've rented to people using Airbnb and VRBO, and I love the screening process because I look at other renters and what they've had to say about the people trying to rent our home, and I have the right to decline anyone that I don't feel, you know, would be a good fit to rent my home and to be a part of the community and take care of the community. I've had absolutely no issues for the last 4 years. And it really, as the other residents said, we utilize that income and the short-term rental income to keep up the properties. As we know, a lot of these homes are very expensive to maintain. We personally purchased a dilapidated property that was sitting there for a couple of years untouched, and we utilize this income to beautify it. So I do think we are missing out on certain things, as well as these renters pay for a lot of our businesses in the summer. They come and they support our local businesses. And I know a lot of the business owners that are depending on it. So I do think we have to really look at a lot of different areas. Thank you so much again for considering this.
Great. Thank you so much for your comments. Any other hands raised?
Linda Moreno is next.
Yes, I'd just like to address the fact in the letter that we sent that short-term rentals are not presently, as I've construed the regulations, even permitted under the zoning regulations. So they do have to be addressed. And I think a public hearing is the proper forum for that. And also, I think there are very significant distinctions between people who have an accessory apartment on their property that they're renting, where they're actually there supervising. And it becomes really burdensome when people are just buying these homes for investment purposes and leaving it to the surrounding neighbors to deal with the constant in and out flow of guests. So essentially, you're living next to a motel. So I think there are very significant distinctions between what has been expressed by the two residents just now and the trend that is happening in Madison, where people are buying these properties for investment purposes and renting them out on a short-term basis with nobody present. When somebody else is present on the property, who is the owner, there's a significant difference on the burden that is imposed on the neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Next, please state your name and address, please.
Paul Wertheim, and I live currently at 321 Horse Pond Road, and I did sign the letter, and I was hoping that the board today could possibly just address some of the points in the letter. The reason I got joined this initiative to maybe not necessarily ban Airbnb, because I've used it myself. I'm not against the service at all, but I had an incident in July of 2019, 4th of July weekend, where my parents' house, which they've owned since 1977, and is rich with memories, wonderful memories, was basically invaded by like 30 people for 5 days and 5 nights. And it was just the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen. This is a little quarter-acre lot, the adjacent lot is. We knew the family for years, but the elder parents had passed away, and the children were trying to hold on to the house and subsidize the subsequent maintenance and taxes with short-term rentals. But on this occasion, pretty much for the whole summer, they had just done it this first summer, we would see, people in groups of 20 to defray the exorbitant cost of the rent, just pile into this little 3-bedroom house and turn the backyard into just a total zoo. So, our family had suffered a tragedy that summer, and my parents were not, they were in a mode of grieving. And this was just, it was just beyond the pale. There was no peace and quiet the entire summer. And it's normally a very peaceful and quiet neighborhood. And so, it was upsetting to me at the time. And, my parents are in their 70s, and I felt a responsibility to try and stand up for them and try and protect them from that abuse. So that's why I joined this whole thing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Next comment, please. Go ahead. State your name and address, please.
Yep. Keith Costa, 509 Boston Post Road. I should state out front that I applaud your public service. I served 11 years with the Department of Justice and federal law enforcement. And you don't have to be a lawyer to understand the law of unintended consequences. And the short-term rental restrictions, I think, would bring some unintended consequences. So I'm worried. The prior gentleman talked about maintaining peace and quiet. That could easily be addressed with a noise ordinance. I'm not sure what the state of the law is in Madison on that, but that's not the overbroad solution to searching for a problem that I think the short-term rental restrictions would become. And that's the unintended consequence I'm worried about. So yeah, let's start small with a noise ordinance. If I have a neighbor who's disturbing my peace and quiet, I'll call the police and we'll deal with it. We don't need to restrict my ability as a property owner. I've had this house for 20 years and occasionally I am going to rent it out because I'm away, even if it's a week. It's a 1740 Captain Eber Judd house. Someone should be here. I don't want it to be vacant. And I think it's important to the vibrancy of our town and supporting local businesses that the historic district is occupied. So when I'm away, with all due respect to the board members, and again, I served in public service, what right do you have to tell me as a property owner I can't screen and allow my house to be rented out? I've handled it myself. I'm an attorney. I know what I'm doing. So I'm going to appeal to your sense of truth, justice, and the American way. Okay. Truth, what seems to be the problem? I think these restrictions are searching for a problem. Justice, if you've got a noise problem, call the police. And American way, just beware of the law of unintended consequences. Okay. I mean, I want government to support me and serve me as a taxpayer, but I don't want big government on my back telling me what I can and cannot do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any other hands raised, Lauren? No? There's also there's also an opportunity at the end of the meeting for public comment. And just to highlight again, this is a discussion, kind of fact-based today. And there'll be further conversations about this over the next couple of months, as well as a formal public hearing on this topic. So I just want to let those who are attending know that there'll be many more opportunities to share your views. With that, then I will move it on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is a presentation from the Charter Review Committee. The Charter Review Committee was established 18 months ago, I think, and kindly had a great group of volunteers. And I know Noreen had participated at one point before she joined the Board of Selectmen on that committee. They meet weekly. It's been a huge effort. The town is long overdue to an update of our charter. And so I think they're here to present their final recommendations to the Board of Selectmen. Today is to listen and to ask questions on their recommendation. And then we as a board can decide how we want to move forward on this. We have an opportunity to revise things or not revise things. And then we have to decide how we're going to allow the public to vote on this, because ultimately it's the town through a referendum that would vote on any charter revisions. So we'll have to talk about all that process and everything also at a later meeting. But I want to welcome the members of the Charter Committee and also Joe Mcdougall, who has used steady hands to guide through very turbulent waters at times, I'm sure, on this committee. So with that, I will turn it over to Joe.
So I think, given my habit of excessive caffeine consumption, no one would accuse me of having steady hands. So thank you. I'm Joe Mcdougall. I've been a resident of town for 25 years. By day, I'm a law professor at the University of Connecticut. But as you guys probably know, I've served on most of the town boards over the years. And for the last 18 months sounds so long, Peggy. I've been the chairman of the Charter Review Commission. So joining us, or most of us, I want to at least thank the whole commission. We were composed of Matt Gordon and Liz Daly, who's here. We also had Robert O'Connor, Mark Casparino, Joan Walker, known to all of you, and Dave Osterman. I think I've got everyone. Of course, our former person who was with us for almost the whole way until she was elected to some other thing was Noreen, who, thank you, Noreen. She was our giving us the benefit of her wisdom throughout really the bulwark of most of what we've done. And of course, really the Charter Review Commission would be impossible, and I speak for the whole board, without Lauren. Lauren's ability to take us through our revisions, make sense of some of our comments that might have lacked a certain grammatical clarity, and turn them into a side-by-side document was just speaking as a general matter, just an incredible feat. So thank you, Lauren. If you guys can kindly, mint up a medal for her, I think it would be certainly well put in place. So as Peggy said, this is the beginning of a process, not the end of one. The way that we looked at the charter review, kind of the way we opened up initially, was to begin to sort of challenge some of the assumptions of the process and things that I'd always heard when I sat in your chairs and others about the charter. The public has the ability to have more say on the charter at the end. One of the tasks of the Board of Selectmen is you can determine what questions and how to break up questions to go to the public when we get to this. But the document we're handing to you is a really sort of two phases. One, we have a red line charter, and we have a presentation that I think all of you have probably seen. So you'll excuse me if when Lauren puts it up, if we don't go through it a little on the quicker side. But also we gave you a subordinate memo because we voted on a approved draft of the committee. And then after that time, as Lauren went through and identified certain things, and there was a sort of a subsequent cleanup and review, there's also a memo with some suggestions for you. So before I start, are there any questions or comments from the committee members? Or do you want to save that to the end? All right. Well, in that case, let's kind of go through what we're doing. So this was our charge, beautifully written, I feel, by the Board of Selectmen. Thank you. It's in clarity. We had intended to be finished in a 12-month time, but thank you for the extension. We went through a process of a little bit more extensive legal review on some of the items. It was, I think, very helpful. Ira Bloom and Pete Gelderman of Bircham Moses were extremely helpful to us. They had done a lot of charters, so it was nice to have the benefit of their expertise. And I know the charter was also reviewed by your newish town council, so that was very helpful. The next one, Lauren. So that's us, as I mentioned, and it was really just a joy. I will miss the meetings, so they probably won't miss listening to me. But it was a lot of fun, even through Zoom times, to go through this and to talk about it. And I would encourage the Board of Selectmen to continue a practice of mixing in kind of old hands at town government with people who have new and different perspectives, because that was really quite nice. At times, when Noreen was on the board and Joan and I got to chat about what we thought things were, and then promptly, Liz or Bob or Dave would say, really, because that's not what it says. And it's very helpful to have that fresh perspective. Next, please. So this was our timeline, which really does look like a long time now. I do think that part of our success came from the very beginning of the original interviews, because it forced all of us to go back and actually read the statutes, which were quite a bit of help. I will say that in our final public hearing, we have public hearings on charters. We made some changes as a result of the comments, or for those of you that attended. We had a comment about some of the language of the first selectman charge. We had several comments from former First Selectman McPherson that were very helpful in terms of making sure that the Board of Finance could still continue to state its policies and give guidance to how it wants the budget process to go. So the open process was very useful. We had one attendee who was quite a long time person, but I would say otherwise it sort of rose and fell in attendance throughout. But we always had somebody. What did we want to do? So one of the threshold questions that we had early on, and I apologize if I'm going out of order on the slides, was about whether or not we should consider a town manager form of government. And Noreen, you were very much involved in that part of the conversation as well. And something that we got guidance on quite early on was that if the town wanted to move to town manager form, the actual job and the structure of the charter becomes very different. I think our original conception was, drafted up in a way that there could be a couple of paragraphs that would convert as a town manager or not. And the guidance we got from the attorneys was really, no, that's not the way that works. We would have to draft two completely separate charters. As a result, that discussion, and we went through a lot, that really spent quite some time in getting input on discussion on whether we should have a town manager or an RTM, how the structure might work. I would say that one of our overall themes that we got was that in general, whether it was public or staff or people, Madison over the decades has been pretty well run. It was a fairly optimistic view. So we really then focused our efforts on first, the charter was almost 20 years old. Some of the language was 30 and 40 years old. It was anachronistic. It had certain problems of clarity, punctuation, and even finishing sentences. So we tried to do our best. I'm sure the next Charter Review Commission will sit and wonder what we were doing. But we really did try to clean up the language, get rid of errors, omissions. We would repeat statutes that were then the statutory language and refer to the statute, but if the statute changes and the charter's out of date, we try to clean those things up. Some of that repetition is impossible to remove. We decharterized certain committees and things to provide for more flexibility to the political branches. So we talked about the scope also, how many town meetings. One of the things we did is we tried to make the call for a town meeting to be very significant. Probably like all of you and my own personal view and the commission were concerned about the lack of participation in town government. One thing that we thought drew that in and some of the feedback we got is we have a lot of town meetings and some of them just really are over very small items. So we wanted to make it clear that when you call a town meeting, it signals to the public, it's an important thing, please come out. We modernized the charter. We tried to get rid of things like calling for newspapers. I mean, the language, we thought, I was trying to find the part where the town crier was put in. I'm sure it's still in there, but we did yank out a string of things like that. And we wanted to do our best to help define the elected and appointed boards and commissions to try and read them. Bob O'Connor particularly was always very strong in the idea of if someone's new to government and they're newly sitting on one of these boards, they should be able to read the charter and kind of understand what their job is, which I thought was, tried to make the entire charter a bit more user accessible than just, oh my God, there's a question, what does it say, retrospective. So significant discussion points, make sure the charter helps continue the efficient running of town government. That's cleaning up language, trying to get rid of vagaries, talking to town staff that said, hey, this comes up, we're never quite sure what it means. The town manager piece that I talked about, that's a big commitment. If the town really wants to consider that, our recommendation is pass this charter or the version that you put forward and then relaunch a committee on that point, because that's an entire revision. You as a board would lose certain fiscal powers that you're accustomed to. The Board of Finance would as well. It's a very significant revision. By decharterizing the commission, the certain boards, I think all of you know that we've had certain boards that are in the charter that haven't had any members for a long time. They haven't had a function. We removed several things from the charter. It doesn't mean that these boards aren't important. It just means that now you and your successors can combine boards, recharacterize their charge, change the constituents of it as the town needs evolve. So once something's in the charter, it's inflexible. It doesn't mean that it's removing it doesn't mean it's not important. We talked a lot about the role of the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, the budget process. In that, one of the things I think we started out with was the idea that there was a crisis in terms of the roles. And by the end, really, a lot of the feedback was that there needed to be some revision, and there were a couple of areas that we needed to address, but that the overall structure seemed to work. One of the things that we did is there was regulatory power under the Board of Finance that really, it's sort of unusual. Our attorneys couldn't identify another town where the Board of Finance passed regulations. But based and partially on comments from Fillmore, we changed that mostly to policies, that the Board of Finance can communicate in the budget process what their policies are, but not regulations for spending that could go down to the really would have allowed the Board of Finance to, if expansively used, to subsume the role of the selectmen or any other board for that matter. So we changed that to policies after quite a lot of discussion. And I think as a former BOF chair, I think that's largely what we mean anyway. We increased the Board of Finance membership to 7 members. That's one of the items you may want to consider for an individual question. That was, we really were very curious as the wisdom of the town fathers as to why it was 6 members. Was it about comity? Was it, some deep meaning? And the answer that we best came to is no, that's the way the statute, when they created the Board of Finance, had it at 6 members, and all the other towns have gone to 7 at some time. We couldn't find another 6-member town. I'm sure there's someone out there, there's a lot of towns. So our recommendation is to increase it to 7 to be in concert with everything else. And one item that I think is significant that we proposed, changing the terms of the Board of Selectmen to 4 years. We received a lot of feedback from people that work with towns, people that work in our town, that the 2-year back and forth period creates inconsistency and uncertainty, and that it's inimical to government. As I think Joan had actually looked at a bunch of other towns, and 2 years is not the norm, at least for some of the towns around us. 4 years seems to be more common. There's no particular magic to this position. There's certainly, I think, a substantial interest to try and keep it at 2 years. So the idea is you're super responsive. But I would say the vast majority of the feedback we got was looking for a little more consistency than the 2 years. And that's why the recommendation was 4 years. And we went back and forth, by the way, with 4 years for the first selectman, 2 years for the selectman, then we'd cycle it out in some portion of the board. And the problem with that is that the re-election game then becomes a problem. So we finally ended up with the idea the entire board should move to 4 years, like the Board of Finance, like a lot of other terms. We then went through the engaging the public online hybrid access. We just tried to, who knows what meetings are going to be like as I talk to you through a Zoom screen. So we want to make sure the charter wasn't in the way, and we expanded access and encouraged participation of unaffiliated voters. One of the other things, if I could, just before, in terms of significant things, one of the later things we did was we also did make in significant revisions to the emergency powers. Peggy, this had to do a lot with your own feedback in terms of how a first select person can go and put through their emergency orders, that they're short-term in duration until reaffirmed by the Board of Selectmen. So you'll see some revisions. We backed off several of them. We had a longer presentation, but then it was very helpful when we had Sam come to talk to us about how the EOC worked. So we were able to streamline that quite a bit too. Now, one last thing, just before I go to next steps, is that we also attempted to provide provisions so that you can degenderize your own terms. Selectmen might feel a little weird at the current time. And so we went through and provided at least the ability for selectmen, select woman, select person as you see fit, but more importantly, to make it clear that you guys can vote in keeping with state statute. Our suspicion is that there may be a better term someday, but we as a Charter Review Commission didn't know what it is. But whatever it comes to, then the charter is not in the way, and that's keeping with our current theme. So we voted to send the thing to the town clerk. Thank you, town clerk. The clerk submits to the BOS for review. Here we are. You guys then hold a public hearing on the final CRC document. The Board of Selectmen review and approve the document or resubmission to the CRC if necessary. That was one of the questions I had from some of the selectmen. The Charter Review Commission reviews the BOS revisions and sends it back for a final document to BOS. They approve, reject, and you send to referendum. And then the rest of it's the referendum process. And I think that concludes us, yes. So what I would suggest then, if you have any specific questions now or things you want to talk about, I do have, a good chunk of the commission here, and, maybe we can, see what's on your minds.
Joe, I'd like to jump in. As a former chair of the Board of Finance, let me ask you, during the budget process that we have normally conducted over the last, I don't know how many decades, how would these proposed changes affect what actually happens between the boards during the budget cycle?
The biggest thing, so as you may well remember, Al, I was personally quite a cranky person during the budget process, which I found to be cumbersome. But as the charter stands, you guys have quite a bit more flexibility. The biggest thing we did by far was remove the dates. We had artificial time constraints that, if you recall correctly, at the end, tend to make the last week or two a bit of a flurry. We've now pulled the dates out of the charter so that really it's up to you, except for the final date, as to how you can do the process. So we adjusted the timing. In terms of who votes when, this is something we talk about quite a lot. How do you do the final vote on the budget? As you guys know, eventually the Board of Finance stands up. I used to do it, Peggy, when you were on the Board of Finance, Al. You'd stand up and you go and you have your final budget hearing. Then you sit down, and usually Wright and Polson, and you have a meeting where somebody votes the final budget. And we didn't have a better answer than the Board of Finance continues to vote the fund, because someone has to be the last say. Ultimately, you need to finish the budget. So the Board of Finance remains exactly as in charge, and I think arguably, as intended within the sort of the spirit of the statutes. But the timing was a significant change. I also think the revision to policies versus regulations is also a better way for the Board of Finance to communicate how they want the budget process to go in your interaction with them. Scott, I
raised my hand. I haven't used
no,
that.
your hand went up. It's so orderly here on the Board of Selectmen.
Absolutely. So I can lower it too. So I know, at least through early interviews and discussions with many of us, the role of the Board of Selectmen as it relates to the Board of Finance and sort of eliminating some of the gray areas between the two boards was sort of a hot topic. Can you just talk a little bit about, kind of where at least this particular draft landed in terms of role clarity for both boards?
Sure. And subject to any other members who want to jump in too. We originally wanted to talk about redefining the roles itself and trying to look at ways to add clarity on who's policy and who's approving affordability. But a lot of the feedback we got when we brought in members of the Board of Finance and others was that the current process has its problems, but actually largely works. What most of the feedback we got had to do with concerns around timing, concerns around an expansive view as to what can happen versus what does happen. Bob, you want to join in on this one?
Yeah, my understanding is that the wording, the change from regulations to policies wasn't just changing that word. Regulations seem to say regulations in any area. You could pass, the Board of Finance could write a regulation concerning bird watching and how tall your bird feeder has to be, and having nothing to do with finance. That was the wording, where now it seems to be clearer to me anyway that it's policies related to finance. Joe, is that fair? Joan?
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we wanted to make sure of is that there was one legislative body, and that was the Board of Selectmen recommendation to the town meeting form of government. Regulations kind of state, okay, this is what we have to abide by, versus policies. Yes, we're going to follow these policies. We're going to try to keep to these policies. These policies are in place. They will continue to be a positive influence on any bond rating and things like that. But a regulation is something as defined very different. And I think that allows a very differentiation between what the Board of Selectmen and what the town meeting form of government does versus the policies that the Board of Finance enact.
Scott, I would also say that originally we had just removed regulations entirely. And at some point in time, it was, again, in conversation where at the public hearing with Fillmore, where he brought up things like debt limits and other items. And these are things that, frankly, as policy statements, you probably want to communicate to the other boards, as opposed to a regulatory expression as to what you have to do to relieve money from an account, for that kind of thing. Peggy, do I get to call on you in your own meeting? This is the best meeting I've ever had.
I'm having fun with this. So just two things. One is, the nomenclature, and I know we've talked about this before, but a lot of other New England states are going to select board, and then their board members, right? In a conversation, it may have been with Joan, because I'd asked her about this. Is that because the state does not allow, Connecticut does not allow the change of the terms of the Board of Selectmen and town meeting for the government, or is that, and then we have to wait some sort of statutory change?
I'm sorry, Peggy.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand that. So I know you've allowed, I guess, the Board of Selectmen, and if you could walk through how that process would go, though, if we were to change our name, how would that go? And then are there limits from what the state allows?
Sure. So two pieces on that. And Lauren, maybe you can actually hunt for the language on that piece. So first, I highly recommend, as you change your name, you consider the Avengers. It's a nice name. It's catchy. But secondly, the way that the concern that was brought up from the attorneys, and I think it's right, is the Connecticut general statutes say Board of Selectmen all throughout the place. And as a result, there is one thing that you are. I have to believe that's going to change. I haven't checked the legislative action of last week. Maybe there was a study group being put up on this point. So I assume it will change. And Lauren, if you've located the language, we can actually put up the piece to show what we're recommending. Somewhere I hear Lauren searching up and down. Largely, I think what we included was a provision that said that it could be selectman, select woman, select person, and a name as was chosen by, and I think it's 4 members of the Board of Selectmen, but I need the actual language. So you can vote to call yourself something. Please don't pick something ridiculous and make us look goofy. But yeah,
well, I guess to me, though, that could create a little chaotic, because every board that comes in might choose a different way, and you might have one board member wanting one thing, and so that's all. I'm just reflecting on it. That's all.
There is a state legislative committee right now that actually is working on this. So the timing was not good. If it had been maybe a month later, we would have the results of that and said, okay, now they're the Board of Supervisors or the Board of Archons or something. But Selectmen is if you were doing a state constitution, that's not what you guys would be called.
Yeah, and I think, go ahead, Joan.
And I think that one of the things that is, if that does go through from the state level, that's something that at the board level, you guys can make that modification. I don't think there's anything that stops that change from happening throughout, and then it can be voted on, because it's nomenclature at this point in time.
Is it almost, Joan, like a internal name versus a outwardly facing name, like what we represent to the state as opposed to what we call ourselves inside the town?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So, when I was on the board, I said, can you please reference me in minutes as select woman? And that took about a year to do. But, so I think that this is, here we go.
Yeah, this is the actual nomenclature and usage section. So what we did for this piece, and again, this is, you guys have to live this. So, think about, it's a good thing for you to discuss among yourselves. It says, if the state of Connecticut through a legislative act alters existing gendered language in the general statute, permits such language change in local charters, Board of Selectmen with a vote of at least 4 members may make such alteration in this charter without additional approvals. However, no such change shall alter the power or authority of any board. In other words, doesn't change us. And said, in the meantime, it doesn't say in the meantime, I did. Individual members of the Board of Selectmen may choose to be called a select man, select woman, or select person, or other terms as appropriate and voted by the board. It's just a hard area. It feels that selectmen at the moment is odd, but it would be great if, Peggy, to your point, it became select board.
Mm-hmm.
It'd make it a lot easier, that's for sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
I'm seeing that, Vermont, Massachusetts, I'm trying to remember, there was one other state, where I saw signs, political signs up all over, and it's all select board, select board, select board. So it seems that's the trend. And I was just curious if, would not, you were still referring through this document. I mean, this is a separate topic that the board can talk about, but we have some flexibility here. And obviously the state, if there's restrictions at the state level, we'll have to wait till those get changed.
since it looked to us, and we talked about this, I think Bob was the first one to flag it for us, that we wanted to do something, but how do you do something when you've got a statutory structure? So like kind of one of our big themes, we try to get the charter out of the way of it. So that as this evolves, you don't have to launch a whole new charter review commission and have to worry about it. You guys can modify it on your own as soon as there's a statutory thing for members.
Okay.
If I might switch topics on the idea of the 4-year terms. One of the concerns I think that I've always had is our municipal elections tend to have lower turnout than our even year elections, whether it's the state or the presidentials. And because I agree that we can't stagger the Board of Selectmen like we do the other boards. So it's a 4-year rotation. In those off years, did you guys discuss, possibly even lower turnout because there is no first on the municipal ballot? And would you, or did you consider harmonizing all the municipals into the same 4-year cycle, giving voters a year or two off in between? Because right now we have an election every single November. Would it make sense to unstagger the Board of Finance and possibly unstagger the Board of Education, and once every 4 years have this giant municipal election?
So I'll turn it over to Joan, who was the by far our best advisor on the domino game of elections, because we talked about this in a bunch of different contexts, though I don't believe the way that you're talking about in terms of the other boards. But Joan, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong.
And no, we did not talk that through. And I think that's really a very good idea. I think that might actually promote more responsiveness if it's like, okay, every 4 years we've got the municipal, and every and it's always in an odd year, so people are not necessarily gearing up for it necessarily. It might give people a break for running. Right now we're staggered, so we'd have to somehow figure out how to, do we cut a Board of Ed or a Board of Finance member down to 2 years, or do we expand that group to 6 years on the first round of it, that type of thing. But I think it is absolutely something that should be looked at. And I'm sorry that we did not think about it at the time, but would highly recommend it, quite frankly, because I think it is tiring not only for the people who are running and trying to do it that's often, but also I think the public could use a break every now and then and say, okay, we don't have to think about politics for 1 year out of 4, quite frankly, because the other 3, you're going to have midterms and presidentials and things like that. But I think it would give a breather, so to speak, and we have to have them on the odd years. That is a requirement by state statute. It can't be combined with a constitutional state or a federal presidential.
So I would also say, Bruce, that's in keeping with one of our themes. So it sounds a little odd. One reason to raise the limits on dollar amounts for town meetings and to increase the sizes is to signal, hey, this thing's coming up, pay attention. And kind of in concert with the same idea, consolidating more of the elections so that people know it's election season and now come out, maybe generate more attention. It's kind of a bit of the same process. Oh, go ahead, Bob. I'm sorry if I talked.
Yeah, just a quick comment. When in doubt, get some data. And the topic of how frequency of local elections and how it affects turnout, there's all kinds of data on that, not from Madison, obviously, since we haven't tried it in different ways, but we can find out to what effect it influences turnout. My suspicion is that it may not as much as you think. There are some people are just habitual voters. You know, they're going to vote, and some people are not unless it's more of a national thing. But that's a hypothesis. It's researchable. I'll be quiet.
No, I think I'm looking at a screen of habitual voters. Hello, there they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of truth to that.
And probably the people that are on watching us as well.
Just a process comment. I think, you know, for the selectmen, I would like us to try to get on a trajectory to have this on the November ballot. So for us to work backwards from that, I think would be good.
Was there a proposed timeline already, Peggy, that
Yeah.
already thought?
So, well, I think this is something that we need to address at our next meeting because there's some complications and time constraints. If that's what the objective is, you know, it's a state ballot. So we're now having to have it finalized by the end of August. There's also going to be other questions on the state ballot. So, and depending on how many questions we pose, that could be complicated if we have a lot of local questions, as well as the state has other referendum issues on the ballot. So my thought was these are all things we could talk about at the next meeting. The problem is if we don't do it in November, it becomes either a standalone or then we have to wait till next May, right? Which is too long, I think. And so, and I also, you know, standalone is a possibility, but specifically with the charter, you have to get 15% turnout. Our budget referendums, we don't get 15% turnout. But we did get it for the, you know, bonding referendum. So, so we would maybe be taking a gamble if we did a standalone that we could generate enough interest and get people to come out. So I think lots to talk about. My thought was putting this as an agenda item involving Nancy. And then also just getting an idea of, do we want to have a standalone meeting on this topic where we could also review any possible, you know, issues that board members have with the, not issues, but things you'd want to modify based on the recommendation the committee has made. And maybe we just have a standalone meeting on this and we can talk about timing, process, you know, pick a target date and then talk about any revisions we might want to make, because we might want to have them come back and clarify as we spend a little more time leading into this. And we could do that, you know, in the next 2 weeks, even just to keep this moving, because if it's going to go in November, we got to get this all done and wrapped up in a bow and voted on. And I'm not sure do we have to have a public hearing again before we would vote to send this to refer? We do, right? So
Yes, you do.
Yeah. So we've got to, so I think maybe what we could do is schedule something for the next 2 weeks that is a standalone meeting, just focusing on charter for the board. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. I think it
Okay.
gives us focus.
It'll give us an opportunity then, and I probably would invite the committee to attend that so that if there are specific questions that come up, and maybe we even have, if we feel we need it, we could include Ira as well on that call. So we can kind of dig into some of the specific issues that board members might want to dig into.
The only thing I would mention on timing is that the sooner that the current charter is costing money and time, not to put too fine a point on it, both in your public hearings, in some of the lack of clarity, in your ability to restructure some of the, you know, and reappoint commission members. So the sooner you can get that in place, I think you will have a smoother operating town government, you know, as we put forward it the day after it's passed. You know, that sounds a little bit, but I think that some of the financial constraints on throwing stuff out and buying new things are causing you problems right now that you don't even know that I would have known without the staff coming to talk about it.
Well, and I think also just a quick question on the timelines. You've taken timelines out because we have a very tight timeline that we have to follow for the budget referendum. We also have one of the later budget referendums in the state. So I don't know, do you have a specific date that you just set in there that we have to have the referendum by? And then we can create our own timeline, or are you recommending a new timeline that maybe has more?
Lauren, do you have, rather than me doing it from memory, because we went through a couple of versions, in general, we pulled back to the state statute with, I think, with one exception. Lauren, do you have the budget cycle available to pop up on the screen?
Give me 1 second.
Because that is something that if we were trying to get a more aggressive timeline, that does push back a lot of schedules for the fall, right? In terms of how we and our CIP process and all this other stuff. So we would need to be thinking about that a lot this summer.
Yeah, you will end up with more flexibility under this charter, so that the budget cycle can be done later at your discretion. You can certainly do it earlier, but this way, you're quite right. You would actually want to get it there. So if you'll see this for those of you that are charter watchers out there in the world, you'll notice that this is a shorter section. And notice the language. It is expected that the referendum will be held the last week of April. However, it should be no later than the 25th day of May, which we pulled out from the state statute, and that's a significant change because the reason we wrote the expectation language was we know this Board of Selectmen, of course, remember how it was done, but some later one might not want it to. So what we wanted to do was set the ideas to where we expect it to come through, but we didn't want to be in the situation like one year when I was a Board of Finance chair. We had an issue. The state didn't pass its budget. At that point in time, we got several funds we got several $1 million for the educational sharing. And as a result, we didn't know what to do. So at that time, and I have to always applaud the citizens of Madison that year. I mean, everyone knew it was chaotic. We passed a budget that was clearly overtaxing the citizenry by almost $1 million because we thought we would get nothing. We said so, and then we worked with all the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Education to then have them voluntarily reduce their budgets later. I mean, there was nothing that would have allowed them to, as a bit of good faith among all the boards. But why were we in that position? Because of the artificial earlier date in times of crisis. So we've opened up a greater flexibility. And it could be that you guys, living it and playing the game with it, saying we have till the 25th day of May, then maybe we want to do it in a different cycle due to other things that come due. I mean, I think it invites a really interesting staff discussion, but it's not for the charter to determine the artificial date. And that's
I think that and I was on the Board of Finance when we had 2 budgets voted down, and we were really caught between I think the final referendum was held in July. So after the tax bills went out, because you still have to, by state statute, send out tax bills. And so if you have your first budget fail, and like ours is on May 17th, you have a timeline you still have to go through to bring it back to voters. So I think this is great to allow that, try to target the end of April, and then it gives more opportunity too. If a budget is voted down, you can still be within reasonable time frame to finalize and send out the tax bill. So
it also gives a little more time for public input, frankly. If the public voted something down, there was always a question of how do you know what it means when suddenly you're noticing the next budget referendum date 3 days later.
The other thing we did take out was there was a charter requirement of 2 notifications rather than just 1, and that was not in line with the secretary with the state statutes. So that also allows a lot more flexibility, considering our notices in a publication that requires so much heads up time to get it in on the proper week that it has to be there. So that alone, I think, is going to give a lot more flexibility as well.
And significantly, if you notice the last paragraph, the last sentence in the second paragraph, notices will be published on the town website and other media as designated by you guys. Because in the future, right now, you're publishing in newspapers per the Connecticut General Statute, physical papers, where if that gets relieved, the timeline, and talking with Nancy and Lauren and everyone else, just about the mechanical timeline of prepping for publication, what you thought was your date, or at least what I used to think was the date, was much earlier because of newspaper requirements themselves. You still have that requirement today, but the charter doesn't buy you into it. Now I don't know who's calling. Peggy Al has his hand up.
I'd like to just follow up on that. I want to ask a foundational question on this section. I like the fact that you're providing more flexibility. I wonder if, Joe, if your committee considered eliminating the date requirements entirely and leaving it up to the elected officials for any given year to figure out what the best timeline is. In other words, is this a requirement that the charter has these kinds of dates in it?
So my recollection is, subject to someone correcting me, is that the 25th day of May, we charterized because that date was the outer bound of what would then cause a string of other problems for us, for bond reporting, for I'm trying to remember all of them, but we selected that reason based on statutory, but also operational concerns. Anyone remember that with
setting the mill rate and getting the tax bills out? Yeah. Because the first tax bills have got to be out by July 1. And so you had to work your way back, and that's the latest possible date for operationally not to cause chaos within town government.
And I don't think we wanted to leave the idea up that some future Board of Selectmen might decide, when we're doing this, never. That's when we're doing it, never. So because there is a function, right? Peggy brought up, if a budget goes down, you just function on the prior year's budget with some percentage increase, having had to read that year. But you continue in some basis. But you need at least a date, Al, and also. If people get voted to the Board of Finance, they're going to look at this and say, when do we have to do that? If you leave it totally squishy, you might get the wrong idea and then mess up the operations. So the 25th of May was how we came to it. But we removed the interim dates, which were artificial.
Well, with that, then I'm just looking in the interest of time and knowing that we'll have a meeting, a more working meeting, focusing on this. I think if there's any other board member questions, or we can wrap up and then we'll focus on a special meeting. So, all right. Well, I want to thank again all the hard work and time that the committee has put together, and we're excited to get this process moving forward. So, thank you for all your dedication. Great job, Lauren, with working with them. I know she now probably has a legal degree, I think, after all this work.
Well, never too late for you guys either. Just let me know.
Credits or something. So, but with that, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and we'll certainly invite you back for our next meeting on this topic. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So the next item on the agenda is discuss short-term rental issues and policy options. I'm going to invite our town planner, who's prepared some materials. I also just want to, I think I've mentioned this to board members and to some citizens, but I am an owner of my husband and I own a property in town that we have a family member live in most of the year, but we do short-term rentals occasionally in that property. And so given this is obviously an important issue, I would be recusing myself as we start moving down a policy and voting and things like that. But so want to just make that aware, and Scott Murphy will be kind of handling and guiding us through this discussion as we move forward. And with that, I will turn this over to Erin Mannix to talk a little bit more about, and I think today the focus is more just on some facts and background on short-term rentals in Madison. Okay.
Thanks, Peggy. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me back. So I put together just a little bit of a slideshow here with some facts for us. So I will screen share and we can get started. Here we go. So I guess the first item, just to clarify what exactly a short-term rental is considered, it would be a tenancy of 30 days or less in residential dwelling units. As many of us are already aware, they're typically marketed on websites like Airbnb or Vrbo, where residents list their homes or apartments for rent and travelers look for lodging. It has been claimed that this provides travelers with a more authentic travel experience as opposed to a standard hotel stay. And this has come about as part of our trend of economic sharing. Doesn't just relate to space and homes. It relates to ride sharing, Ubers and Lyfts. service sharing, goods sharing, listing your goods for free for swapping, and space. So this is, a millennial concept here of that is taking over, and it is truly reshaping our economy here. And as part of this, the short-term rentals and this post Airbnb, as many of our letters had indicated, it's bringing opportunities and challenges at the same time for municipalities. Some of those advocates are praising new prospects for rising owners, supplementing your income, making use of underutilized space by offering entire homes or rooms to visitors. Madison is a tourist destination. We have a history of seasonal, monthly, and weekly rentals. That does have economic benefits to our community and to our local property owners. The additional units also add inventory to our limited hotel space, and can enhance our economic viability of our local businesses, especially during the summer months. Detractors point to the potential nuisance impacts of short-term rentals. As we've heard, noise, parking, property maintenance, lack of property oversight regarding building safety or number of guests. Those highlight additional concerns that could impact the quality of surrounding residential neighborhoods. So part of my follow-up since our last meeting, I did speak with Captain Harkins of the Madison Police Department, who did clarify that dispatch calls are grouped under general assisted person calls, which could include a variety of concerns, such as wellness checks. It's hard to specifically break out noise complaints or party complaints through dispatch without doing a real in-depth sorting of our previous complaints. Predominantly, our noise complaints in the summer months especially have centered around the beach club or the beach hotel when windows and doors are open for lack of air conditioning. In Captain's opinion, most of the calls that they respond to result in compliance after the officer's visit without further enforcement action needed. However, there are enforcement actions that are available currently, such as nuisance complaints or breach of peace, and citations could be issued. I also followed up with my zoning enforcement official, John DeLaura, to understand the level of short-term rental complaints that have come through the land use department. They have been limited recently to the 2021 petition group, who did meet with our acting town planner at the time and our ZEO, and then in turn did submit this request to the board. The Planning and Zoning Commission also discussed the matter of short-term rentals in the fall in September of 2021 and followed up with a letter to the board as well. Wanted to provide you with a snapshot of what rentals look like currently in Madison. So as we can see here, this is just our MLS listings in town, which does show that the concentration of most rentals are located south of Boston Post Road in our beach areas. Of these 25 rental properties that were available as of yesterday, one was listed as an annual rental, 6 were academic rentals, and 18 were short terms. They were broken out further into 10 weekly rentals, 2 of them for a minimum of 2-week stays, 1 for a 3-week stay, and 4 listings for a month stay. These really are varied. Some of them are examples of residents leaving for 3 weeks and hoping to rent their house during that time. Others are fully furnished. Most all of these are fully furnished, vacant for at least a portion of the summer months. Additionally, there were 159 units listed on Airbnb as of yesterday. These included private rooms and entire houses. I noted that our bed and breakfasts, hotels, inns, they also list through Airbnb to help fill their rooms. This is another research that I did was through AirDNA. And this illustration here shows, again, the concentration of rentals historically are below the post road in our beach areas. According to AirDNA, 69% of the rentals in Madison were booked through Airbnb, 19 of them through VRBO, and 12% were listed through both platforms. The average rental was 2.9 bedrooms, about 3 bedrooms, and 6 guests in the houses. Of these rentals, 23% were one-night stays, 37% two-night stays, 13 for 3-night stays, 6% for the 4 to 6 night, 15% between 7 and 29 nights, and 6% were 30 or more days. According to Airbnb, more than 2,100 guests have stayed in Madison through the website, and on average, the guests have rated their stay 4.9 out of 5 stars. Question was raised whether or not short-term rentals are considered a residential or commercial use. Appellate courts in other jurisdictions have been asked to determine whether short-term rentals are residential or commercial. Based on the cases that I have reviewed, it varies across the country as far as what those findings were. Some of them were shown to be residential in nature and consistent with either homeowner association or local regulations. Others, there were findings of commercial ventures there. So it really does depend on the particular area, but there's case law supporting both. Property owners do profit from the rents earned from guests. However, guests can use the property in the same or similar way that a long-term resident would. So you can see there clearly are arguments for both sides here. So touching back on the Planning and Zoning Commission from September, I did include this memo here to the board. Local governments without short-term rental provisions in our codes were limited in ways to address concerns. Many municipalities, including our town and neighboring shoreline communities, have existing zoning regulations regarding bed and breakfasts or boarding houses or hotel uses. The commission discussed this matter at their meeting of September 2nd and determined that our regulations are silent on the matter of short-term rental for single-family residential structures, as the use is still fundamentally residential in nature. So the commission did send this memo to the board, recommending that we explore oversight and enforcement methods, including a town ordinance. They felt that was the best, more appropriate method should enforcement or regulations be determined to be necessary. The commission has also offered to help provide support to the board moving forward in drafting any necessary regulations. I guess our biggest question here is what are we trying to achieve through regulation? Preservation of single family values, avoidance of commercialization, better property stewardship, protecting appearances, density control, and parking management are good examples. How do we regulate? This varies throughout the country and throughout the state. Options include through the zoning regulations or town ordinance. Through zoning regulation, we could have the ability to allow short-term rentals in certain zones only. We could allow the Planning and Zoning Commission through this mechanism to review site plans for adequate parking or other improvements that the commission deems necessary. Approvals would run with the land through a zoning regulation. Some limitations on this method: enforcement. Zoning regulations are enforced through the ZEO, who only works during regular business hours, rarely at night when noise or parking complaints would occur. Also, in some cases, properties in town have been rented out for decades, and issues of legal non-conforming uses could be raised, and new regulations may not apply to some of those properties. If we move with forward with a town ordinance option, the municipality could require an owner or operator to obtain a license and follow certain criteria. Complaints could be addressed to local law enforcement, who could enforce them during night or weekend hours. License renewals could be required, and licenses required for new property owners. We would avoid the issue of grandfathering and nonconformities. Most municipalities I find are regulating short-term rentals through ordinances because they're issued to the operators, and any updates to laws are binding to all operators. Limitations include that removal of the Planning and Zoning Commission review, who is the expert in the town for reviewing site plans and adequacies on each particular site. And another limitation could be staffing requirements going through that licensing procedure and enforcement. Moving forward, it's clear that we do have short-term rentals here in Madison, and they are growing in popularity. This isn't a new concept. I think Airbnb was founded in 2016. So it has been in our community for many years and will likely continue. And I think there are benefits to property owners and municipalities alike. Whether it's considered commercial or residential use, towns and cities can implement reasonable regulations to ensure that our short-term rentals do not negatively impact our neighborhoods. The key to enforcing short-term rentals is to come up with regulations that are clear, easily enforced, and don't make our residents out to be lawbreakers. Enforcing blanket prohibitions or onerous regulations can put a drain on our community resources. Municipalities throughout the country are regulating short-term rentals, all with their own twist, including Connecticut. Some regulation options include posting or availability at the town hall of local contact responsible for handling problems, providing off-street parking standards, noise and nuisance provisions, garbage or refuse collection requirements, spacing requirements between short-term rentals. For example, the distance between one to another to ensure that an entire block does not turn into a short-term rental district. Reinforcement of normal occupancy limits, number of people who may live in the home, proof of code compliance, fire safety measures, adequate water and sewer service, other utilities or infrastructure that could be of particular concern, requirements for notifying neighbors or limitations on turnover, minimum stay or maximum number of days that the short-term rental operates within a particular month or year, limitations on particular areas where short-term rentals are allowed or areas where they're not regulated at all. So we, I will stop sharing here. We have quite a bit of resources available to us. This is not a situation where the town would need to reinvent the wheel. I'm happy to provide the board, should you feel it appropriate to move forward with some level of either registration or regulation of short-term rentals. And I'm happy to provide more details of examples at a future date. But I think today I just wanted to reiterate that, yes, we do have short-term rentals here in town. We've had them for a while. Our complaint base is relatively limited in town. And we have to get through the more challenging questions of how we wish to proceed and what the board feels most important, most appropriate, excuse me, at this time. Does anyone have any questions regarding the information that I've shared?
Aaron, thank you for putting this all together. I appreciate that. The letter that we got from P&Z back in the fall talks about the silence of the regulations on this. We received a letter that took a different read and had the opinion that the way the ordinances, or not the ordinances, the regulations were written, that this type of rental is in fact really not permitted. Can you reconcile those two opinions?
I think that, oh, excuse me. My initial thoughts of this is those opinions of the residents were brought. Those were the initial concerns that were brought to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I was not included as part of that discussion, as I started shortly after. But it was the commission's opinion that as they were silent, and they also felt that the rental of a single family house is still use of a single family house. I can't speak as to whether or not they got into the number of days. Ultimately, they felt that occasional bad behavior or a lack of oversight by property owners is simply not a land use matter. They recognized that they created a potential for neighborhood concerns and conflicts, but did not find that that they were prohibited in the zoning regulations. So there is a difference of opinion, I think, in that interpretation. I would follow the guidance of the Planning and Zoning Commission as they are their regulations. I can say that some of our regulations are in need of some updates. Some of them have been on the books for decades and clearly predate this concept of short-term rentals, and more so the advertising and the online availability. Not to say that the town hasn't had short-term rentals in our history, in our beach community. I think it just wasn't anything that was regulated in that sense and brought to light through, you know, the ability to rent easier through these online platforms. So I think, you know, our basic bed and breakfast regulations, they're very specific. You know, some of the information in the as far as quoting the regulations are accurate in the neighbors' letters. There's bed and breakfast regulations that specify certain locations on the Boston Post Road. That's absolutely true. That's where our regulations are. It's silent as far as some of the other residents said, if I go away for a month, can I rent my house to someone else? If I go away for 2 weeks, can I have somebody stay there? So yeah, I think if we are looking for that clarity, we should be adding new language and not relying on the existing zoning code as it's written.
So it's not necessarily legal or illegal or not allowed or not allowed. It's just silent is what I'm hearing.
Right, right.
Yeah. Okay.
And which is, it's similar to other municipalities. There just aren't, unless they came in with an amendment to clearly identify what a short-term rental is. Most of the regulations in neighboring communities are silent. They speak to, and some of those commissions may find that their interpretation of the regulation, if they're silent, means it's prohibited. Our commission did not specify that in their memo to the board.
Aaron, I'm curious, just based on all your research, and I'm sure you've read all of the comments that we received from the public at this point, and we certainly do appreciate all of the public input, you know, throughout this process. I think it's hugely important and frankly helps inform us as well. But I guess I'm curious, you know, in your assessment here, you sort of pointed out to, you know, most of the police calls resulted in compliance as an example. What problem are we trying to solve here relative to short-term rentals? Is it the silence, or is it actually an issue, you know, that there's a ruckus happening or garbage? You know, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Not anything. No, sorry.
Thanks for that, Scott.
Yeah, I'm here.
I think that's the question. And some areas, you know, clearly there are neighbors who feel there is a problem in their particular neighborhood, in their experience. So that's not necessarily, you know, whether we can document that through police reports or zoning complaints, we don't have that data to support the claims. Not to say that people are not being disturbed or disrupted at their homes. And not to say that we have short-term rentals that have operated very successfully. You know, there may be a couple problem properties, you know, that decided to give this a try over the last year and have clearly made an impact on their neighboring properties. I don't think this is going away. I don't think there is necessarily harm in creating some level of registration or policy on this. You know, we do run the risk of changes in where you do have corporations coming in and purchasing properties on blocks. It happens across the country, hasn't necessarily occurred here in town, but that is a fact that some neighborhoods are being purchased by LLCs who are taking advantage of short-term rentals. So that's a real fact. And if the board is looking to be proactive and try to create some policies to prevent that from happening in our community, then that's one way of looking at it as well. I guess how onerous these regulations are is really up to, like I said, what are we trying to do? Maintain character of neighborhoods, have some accountability, a contact person, you know, protecting the appearance of properties. I think also it may be helpful, you know, there are a lot of neighborhood associations in these areas and beach communities, you know, so where there are private beaches. So some of these properties that are being rented out have private association beaches. And so now the residents who are part of the association are sharing their amenities with rentals. It's not necessarily something that has to be focused just on our on a government level, but these homeowners associations can also come up with criteria and policies in their own organizations to help manage what happens on their properties. You know, parking down on the beach has been a concern in previous years. I know, especially during COVID, where you know, beaches would close or nobody could go anywhere else, you know, and so we've had instances where we've added additional parking control signs and monitored on-street parking. That it has its challenges also and limits the residents who live there too. And enforcement clearly, who, you know, whose vehicle is this, or if you're having a small party at your house, you know, now your guests can't park on the road. So everything, you know, I think we have to kind of take it slow and look through what are the goals, and that's a great question. What are we trying to achieve with a regulation? And your choices are to do nothing, you know, or to create a regulation. So yeah, I think we'd be looking for a little more feedback from the board, how you know, what your sense is, if you feel you do want to look at how some other communities are managing things and some options before you commit to what type of regulation you're looking at.
So two thoughts. First, Peggy, I want to thank you for disclosing your concern about a conflict. I can tell you personally, I believe that you would be able to maintain your objectivity in this discussion and would be perfectly comfortable to have you participate fully in the discussion. That's, you know, whatever the board feels is appropriate, but that's my opinion. Second, Scott, I think it's a mistake for us to begin to frame this as a problem based on complaints that we need to resolve. I think at its core, what we have is technology has run out ahead of policy. And the task in front of us is to figure out policy that makes sense in light of this new technology and the practice it has. And I think that question of what do we want this to look like on the other end is one of the core discussions for us to have. We've got this tension between decades-long practice of rentals and a shorter but still a trend of these areas becoming more and more neighborhoods in year-round residences. And I think that's at the core of the tension that we need to address, not a prohibition in its entirety, or creating the wild, wild west where anything goes. I think, but that's we're looking to find the balance between the neighborhood and the long-term practice. And I have faith that we've got folks who are representing well both sides of the conversation. And I think by continuing that conversation, we're going to be able to find something that is acceptable to the townsfolks.
Well, but I just to speak specifically, Bruce, to your comment, I do agree with you. I think on most of your points there, but I think there's also, something here about, town government and our role in this conversation. How far does town government go to engage in putting forward a solution? To me, there's potentially a slippery slope there. We just need to decide, I think, what is our role in regulating here, and do we have a role? I think maybe that's a better way than just, is there a problem? But is there a need for us to regulate, I guess, is a good question.
May I just add, Bruce said, there's been decade-long rentals, but not at this level. And it's not going away. It's just going to get bigger. We've got over 100 town residents that have reached out to us with a problem. And, if you were having guests in your home and turning your house over for no money, the noise issue would still be an issue. Parking could still be an issue. So we have to balance that. But I'll tell you where this is going. The thing we haven't talked about is safety. If we don't regulate this in some way, I think this eventually could come to a safety issue. We talk about 27 people in a house where there's drinking going on or whatever. Party, let's say usually it's parties. And we certainly don't want to take away. I was one that rented a house for 4 days when my son got married. You want people to have that right to be able to do it. But there are issues here with safety and with people who have homes, who live there and want to rent them, aren't the same, I think, as people who are just buying them up. And, it's a business. But I've heard from people beyond the people we're hearing from today that live in neighborhoods just in from the water, maybe, and their life's being impacted by this in the summer. They've got kids on the street. They're uncomfortable with the cars in and out. So I think we need to address it with the regulation. I'm totally in support of making sure we address this overall. Years ago, we did do Al, I don't know if you were on the board, we did do a noise ordinance study, and we decided not to do anything. And we worked with the police department. We might want to, just on that one issue alone, see what the police can tell us about enforcement of a noise ordinance, and if it works, and how we can do it. But I think parking and cars in and out are equal problems here.
Erin, I want to compliment you on your presentation. I found it extremely helpful for organizing my thoughts. I do think the ordinance approach makes a little more sense for us, but I'm interested in understanding what the minimally intrusive approach would be to accomplish what we need to accomplish. And it sort of gets back to Scott's original question: what is the problem we're trying to solve? And I think our community is giving us a lot of insight as to what the problems are. So for next steps, I would be interested in learning what other communities have done that is the least intrusive regulatory approach. And I sense that probably all five of us are somehow searching for that at the moment. And that's where I think we should go next.
I would agree with Al. I think trying to find that path of least resistance where we can address the problems without without reducing the benefits, because I think there's a balance here that we're all trying to find. I think the noise ordinance was brought up in the context outside of short-term rentals, and there continues to be people in town that advocate for a noise ordinance. And I feel like that alone is something that we should be moving forward on. We've had discussions on this in the past. And I'll be honest, I've gotten kind of mixed reviews from the police department, where I have on the one hand, the enforcement is a problem, but on the other hand, it gives them something to enforce. So it is trying to find that balance, and the noise ordinance is something that many communities have. And it doesn't impact property owners' ability to, use their properties as they wish. So I would recommend that we pursue further discussions about the noise ordinance, just because it's a cross section of many different complaints, and it does address some of the complaints coming out of the short-term rentals issue. And then I think one of the recommendations that the P&Z Commission had is that we set up some sort of committee to review jointly with planning and zoning. And I don't know if the board wants to go in that direction, or if it feels it has enough information now that we don't have to do this. I think when my conversations with Aaron have been this, when do these overlap, zoning versus ordinance, and that's where, because you can take the zoning path, which restricts the land use piece. And that's what's effectively, is, and this is, correct me if I'm wrong, the recommendation on banning short-term rentals, is that a zoning regulation or is that an ordinance? And trying to understand, there's overlap all the time on these, and we can take different paths depending on what we're trying to achieve. Because I think the other problem we have is, now we're getting into, the appropriate level of enforcement, commercial versus residential businesses. That also has tax implications. So maybe it is worth having a working group from both boards to come up with the right path. But to Aaron's point, originally, a lot of this has been explored already by other towns. So we might have a easy path to follow that says, okay, you go down the zoning route, and here's the easiest thing to do. And then I think thirdly, what I've struggled with is we have anecdotal complaints, but we don't have data. And at least by creating some sort of tracking mechanism now for these properties through a registration process, that gives the town the ability to track. And then, you put in a registration, and then you have an ability, let's see how this goes the next couple summers. And then you can find out, are these really rental properties, and are they renters that are causing the problem? Or is it just, it's summer and it's a crazy time down by the beach? So by having that type of registry, at least gives us an ability to track and monitor. It doesn't, there's no answer there, but I think it gives us a path forward maybe to exploring those things.
So just to build on that thought, Peggy, I think, if we could exit today with some direction to Erin to go out and find those best practices and to pull together what she considers to be the right best practices for us in preparation of some sort of interactive public meeting, whether we call it a forum or a hearing or whatever, but rather than have a meeting with the townspeople in a blank piece of paper, that we say, okay, here is our first draft written in pencil with an eraser. Give everybody something to react to, and then refine from. I think would be a great path forward for us as a town.
Bruce, I want to build on that point as well. I think I completely agree. Getting best practices from other towns, and even just understanding what other towns are doing, to me is a super start, because I'm not sure I'm clear on what our neighboring surrounding towns are doing at this point. But maybe what we consider is sort of here's sort of Al's words, the least intrusive ordinance, the light touch. here's a medium touch, and here's maybe a little more, aggressive or intrusive touch. So, giving us some options as opposed to necessarily just one single path for us to explore and consider. As I think about this and hearing all the comments, I'm personally, not really interested in considering banning short-term rentals. So I'm putting that out there right now. That's not something I'm comfortable, I think, stating out loud yet, and removing maybe some of the rights of individual homeowners and their individual privacies. So, I think we've got to come up with and maybe there's a starting point. Maybe it's a noise ordinance. Maybe it's, I don't know what those right starting points are. That might be the light touch, but, maybe that's where we start.
I can do that. I'm happy to present that to you for your next meeting and give you some examples. I do have examples of both zoning regulations throughout Connecticut. Some municipalities have gone the zoning regulation route while others have gone through the ordinance. So I can provide you with some of those options and even some examples for the noise ordinance. Again, I think the noise ordinance will coordinate with the police department and any thoughts they may have on that end.
Just so long as we don't link these two conversations together, right? So there may be a worthy conversation about a noise ordinance, worthy conversation about short-term rentals, but I don't think we should link the two. And certainly I don't think that, at least with the information that I've learned so far, that a noise ordinance is going to resolve the topic of short-term rentals.
No, and I think that's an interesting point. I was thinking about when Noreen was talking about the, people having a party with 30 people and, liquor being a problem. Well, that could happen at any home, not necessarily a short-term rental. So to me, it's, it's impacting all residents.
Scott, is that a conflict for you?
It might be. You never know.
One of the things I was trying to say was that these problems that the neighbors are seeing can happen to someone who's not collecting any money for it.
Totally. Yeah.
Let their college son bring all his friends. So we've got to be mindful of that. I used the word regulation, but I misspoke. I personally think we really should be looking at some sort of town ordinance on this. I'm hoping that's where we'll end up going when Aaron contacts the other towns.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that, Noreen, if we even go there at all, but I like the idea of an ordinance.
Can I just suggest that with a mindful eye towards the hour that we are on agenda item 7 of a multi-page agenda?
Yeah, it sounds like we have some to-dos and homework and it'll be a follow-up conversation. So I agree with you, Bruce. I think we've bottomed out.
Would you like that at your next meeting? Or would you?
Or as soon as you have it. And I don't think you need to wait until the next meeting to send us information for us to look at.
But I really like these pretty PowerPoint slides, Aaron. So these were great.
I'm evolving.
And we've got to be conscious that the summer's around the corner here too. If
totally.
We want to get this right, I get it, but if we could move this so that we take care of it for this summer. I keep going back to the safety thing, but we'd be having a different conversation right now if there had been an incident, and you know how easily that can happen.
Okay, great. So I just lost my agenda. So somebody could read the next item on the agenda, please, and then I'll try to find it again.
Sure, that's me also. Approve the application for DECD Municipal Brownfields Assessment Grant application.
Item number 8.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right,
So I'll move that we discuss and take action to approve a grant application to the DECD for municipal brownfield assessment funds for up to $200,000 for the Academy Community Center project.
Second.
Okay, with that, this is, Aaron, just give a quick snapshot of what this is, but it's another opportunity to get some money to help pay for the Academy improvements.
Yes, this is based off of the initial phase 1 and hazardous building materials reports for the building, and which clearly identified the need for additional evaluation, including mold and asbestos and other hazardous materials. So hopefully we will find out in the next month or so if we get some additional funding to help with that.
Erin, is this a competitive application?
Yes.
Yes, it is. And I'm not sure what we're going to hear, but once again, any money will help. So
We should hear by the end of June.
is that what they said? Okay,
Yes,
great.
if we-
Okay,
May I just ask Peggy, this is great. I love seeing all these grants. Are there any federal grants that we could potentially look in the brownfield area? I know this is a state grant, correct?
yes, it is.
Yes, it's a state grant.
A good question. Not sure. We have actually a kind of a database of grants, but we'll go back and look if there's a federal one we can apply to too. We haven't really explored that, so we will.
All right. Good,
Good
thanks.
idea. Okay, with that then, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, great. All right, thank you. All
Thank
right.
you.
Next item on the agenda is discuss and take action to approve round 5 ARP funding requests in the amount of $69,000 as recommended by the ARP funding committee.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great.
May I just specify, Peggy, that the
Yep.
60 of that was really toward the 120,000. The culture group was at culture. I forgot their name.
Madison Cultural Arts.
Cultural
yes.
Arts. Thank you. Was asking for the concert, and 9 of it was to really fulfill our obligation with that. The soup kitchen, as far as the refrigeration truck.
Yep. Okay, and this was recommended by the committee. Any more
Yes.
questions on that? These are all things that had been in the funding request.
Nope.
Any other comments?
Yeah,
Questions?
Peggy, I noticed that the state provided an award to Madison Cultural Arts as well. And does that in any way impact their need for our town funds?
I think the positive is they are not going to need that additional. I think they requested 120 and now they're getting their full budget so they can continue to have the concerts this summer as well as be adequately set up for the next year as well.
So they're getting 60. Excuse me, Peggy. They're getting 60,000
Yeah.
in this grant and 60 from our recommendation.
Exactly. So the
Good.
good thing is that takes away 60 from us having to fund through ARPA. So that's great news. And that award, I think, came through last week's final budget. So I know they also have, to work through cash flow issues because this is a summer. They have to start spending money now on the summer concert. And they were impacted a lot because they had 2 rainy 4th of July cancellations, I think, before COVID. And then the concert got canceled because of COVID. So they had a lot of fundraising challenges leading up to now. And this will be the first time, I think, in 3 years that the concert is going to be held.
So this is just the July 4th concert. This is not
Yes, it
the Sunday Beach and Rec concert series on the green. Okay.
No,
Thanks.
this is just the July 4th concert. It'll be actually this Saturday, which I think is July 2nd.
It
when
is
they're-
July 2nd.
Yeah.
May I just add that I did reach out to them and just to see if they were going to start doing their fundraising, and they are. Their letters will be going out for sponsorship. So, they're stepping up also and working
Awesome.
to make this happen.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is they want to start having rain dates because that was the problem, and it costs a lot of money to have a rain date because you have to pay twice basically for the same event. But if you don't have a rain date, and if they discovered, it hurts their ability to continue doing next year's concert. So, so with that, any other questions? Okay, all in favor of the motion as read, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item number 10 is discuss and take action to approve routine line item transfers totaling $619,567.02.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. Stacy, I'll let you kind of talk through this. This is a normal end of the year balancing act that we try to do where we take money from some accounts where there's surpluses and not surpluses, but there's funds remaining and shift them into areas of other parts of the town budget. So Stacy.
Okay. So yes, the word routine, we do this time of year. About 2 weeks ago, I sent out an email to all town department heads to look at their accounts, come up with line item transfers. This is the first of hopefully only a couple. This is a big one. The number does look a little inflated just because we moved a lot of money around, but I did it in 3 different steps to make it cleaner for you guys. So it's almost double of what it really should be. So I don't know if anyone has any specific questions that you want to ask me first, or I can walk you through the actual forms.
I guess I'm just more curious on who's the benefactor, Stacy, or benefactors of the surpluses. I don't know what the right word is, but who's getting the transfers?
Yeah, so we have a few transfers for the building department, very, very small. Aaron had a couple for the land use, very small. You can look at them if you have any questions on those. We then did a line transfer from my office for $16,000. The biggest piece of that was for the retiree health. We've had some retirements and we were able to find the money in the employment services. So that was the first one that I wanted to bring up. The next one, what we did is we looked at all of our salary accounts because the next few are salary related. We looked in every department. We had some positions that have been open all year round and decided to take advantage and move these balances to areas where we needed funds rather than getting a special appropriation. So a couple of the areas, director of HR, as we all know, Deb's been gone for a few months, so we found a savings in that position. My office, we still have not replaced the accounts payable clerk, so there were some savings there. Public Works, there's an open driver that we just went out and advertised for now. Environmental planner, municipal agent. So we did find a bunch of salary accounts with balances. We moved it up to various line items, but for the most part, we put it into the salary adjustment line items. And that's where I'm going to get to where it's kind of doubled. So we took all of these funds and put it into the salary adjustments so that now we can take the money out of the salary adjustments. And Scott, to your question, we could provide the PD with some additional assistance. So out of all the funds available in these various departments, it was about 256,000. We moved 162 to salary adjustments. So then what we did is we
salary adjustments includes overtime. Is that?
Yep. So salary adjustments is that one line item that we budget for every year, where we put in, various items as well as COLA or increases that are not in the individual lines. So we thought by taking it all from the individual departments, putting it into salary adjustments, then we can go look at the PD overtime accounts. So then what we did is we looked at the PD. And as we know, the overtime is an issue every year. We were able to find about 160,000 within the PD department and reallocate that to where the deficits are in the overtime accounts in the police department. The biggest area that we talk about every year is the overtime replacement. So out of all of the PD accounts, we were able to find about $50,000 that to help that deficit in the OT replacement line item. So then we looked at what the PD was able to absorb and said, okay, now what do we need to take out of the salary adjustments where we put that 162,000 into? We were able to then take 178,000 to cover the rest of the overtime replacement and take that out of our salary adjustments. So this year there is no special appropriation needed for the police department. We did project through June 30th. So we're hoping we're good. We still have a couple months left, but this should be able to cover any projected deficits in any of those PD overtime accounts.
Any additional questions from board members? No? Okay, with that, then all in favor of approving the motion as read, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Stacy. And thank you very much for your wizardry and making sure that we can cover all the stuff without having to do a special appropriation, which is great. So
She is the Wizard of Madison.
I know. Yeah, I know. I was like, curtain's going to get unveiled someday. But next item on the agenda is discuss and take action to approve a special appropriation request for the Department of Public Works in the amount of $75,000 to fund increase in fuel costs pending Board of Finance and town meeting approval.
So moved.
Okay. Second. Yep. Okay, Al. And so this was about a month ago, we had an internal conversation, really like 2 months ago, about, what's happening with fuel prices and where are we exposed as a town. And I think we're in good shape with a lot of our other budgeted items, but the fuel line is one that we felt like, we're getting hit. And we wanted to be prepared for that. So, John, maybe just talk a second about, how we get our fuel. And this is not for buildings. This is for fueling our public works trucks and vehicles, town vehicles.
Right. So it's for gas and diesel. And it's public works is where the account is based out of, but there's also 8 other departments that have a fuel budget item or line item so let me back up. So if you look at the public works account, the starting budget is 88,000, but there's actually, so then we're looking at requesting a special appropriation in the amount of 75,000. It kind of looks worse than it is because of the other departments, the 8 other town departments that have fuel accounts. They actually, I guess, if I understand, it's kind of a complicated account. Maybe Stacy can correct me if I'm mistaken here, but I think the other departments backfeed into this account. So once a month, they essentially get a bill for their usage, their fuel usage. The actual budgeted amount for fuel is more like $250,000 townwide. And so we looked at fuel prices are obviously rising. We're looking at, we did an analysis in March to see, based on where the fuel prices are now compared to the average fuel prices over the last 4 years. We projected, I projected about a $40,000 overage that we would be looking at if that rate continued. And I guess finance also just did an updated sort of analysis, and it's more on the order of projecting like $50,000 increase that we're going to need to cover fuel expenses. And so the last invoices in mid-April, gas prices was $3.86 a gallon, and diesel price was $4.54 a gallon. So like I said, based on that, we think there's going to be we're going to fall short on the order of 50,000. We're asking for 75,000 for the special appropriation. It's a little bit conservative, but there's uncertainty in terms of how high the fuel prices are going to rise. So that's the purpose of this special appropriation.
Any further questions from board members? Nope. Okay. All right. Thanks, John. All in favor of approving the motion as read, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, great. Motion passes, and hopefully we won't need all the 75 in that. But all right, with next item on the agenda is discuss and take action to approve waiving the bid requirement and approving the purchase of a fire rescue boat for Madison Hose Company #1 and to authorize.
I think we got to do number 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to call.
Did I skip ahead? Sorry, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead. Discuss and take action to approve adding to the call of the May 23rd, 2022 town meeting to approve a special appropriation request from the Department of Public Works in the amount of $75,000 to fund increase in fuel costs pending Board of Finance approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion is just relating to the item 4. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry about that. Item number 13, discuss and take action to approve waiving the bid requirement and approving the purchase of a fire rescue boat for Madison Hose number 1, and to authorize the first selectman to sign contracts and documents in conjunction with this purchase. Funding is in CIP.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. And this is, I think, a used boat that had been identified already, that they just want to move forward with the purchase because it's very specific to what their needs are. I
He'd
don't
already
know.
come and talked to us about that anyways. I think.
Yeah, he did a while back. So everybody good with that then? Any further questions?
It's not a helicopter, right?
Yeah.
Let's hope not.
We're buying a boat from a helicopter company. That was.
Yeah. All right, with that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, passes unanimously. Great. And okay, next item on the agenda is discuss and take action to approve appointing the following members to the Ethics Commission. Matus Cieslak, term expiring January 1st, 2024. Michael Pepper, term expiring January 1st, 2024. Nancy Robert, temporary chairman, term expiring January 1st, 2026. Christina Storm, term expiring January 1st, 2026. Susan Wines, term expiring January 1st, 2026. Matt Anderson, alternate, term expiring January 1st, 2026. Barnaby Mortensen, alternate, term expiring January 1st, 2026. Susan Wyville, alternate, term expiring January 1st, 2026.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. So this is the Ethics Commission, and I think I'd send around an email just saying appointing a person as temporary chair just to get the organizational piece done for the meeting, and then on the agenda would be to elect a new permanent chair for the committee. So this is just a temporary chair appointment. So we have somebody organizationally that can kind of pull everything together.
Right. So, I brought this up to you guys offline. And I appreciate that the Charter Review Commission is proposing some new language around this. But as we sit today, we've got the ordinance, which specifies that the chair is picked from the within the voting members. And then in the town charter, we've got language that talks about these commissions picking their own chair. I think my concern is us tipping our hand on this. I think that, having interviewed all of these people with Al, we really have created a group of rock stars here. I think that this is a group of very capable, qualified people and will serve us well. My preference would be for the group to just avail themselves of Robert's rules and self-elect a temporary chair, and then elect a permanent chair without any hand from us. So I'm going to make the motion that we strike the reference to temporary chair to this motion.
I guess I don't necessarily agree with you, Bruce, because I think we've had precedent where we've done it in the past. To me, this is just a temporary chair.
But I second this so we can have a discussion. I'll second it so we can have a discussion. Okay.
Can I keep discussing?
Okay, so don't we have to vote on the amendment first and then have discussion about it?
No.
So as a matter of process, we can make a motion to amend a motion. And then what we do is we vote in reverse order. So we would discuss and vote on the amendment. And then go back to the full.
Aren't we already in discussion at this point?
Okay, so we're on a discussion for the amendment is what Bruce is saying. Okay.
Right.
But I didn't get a chance to discuss on the.
Yeah, I interrupted you, Scott, because I was thinking that we had to vote.
I should be able to discuss before we make an amendment.
Scott, after it's amended or not, you will be able to discuss that part of it, but we have to do the act on the amendment now and have the discussion first. And then you.
I agree with you, but okay.
No, and then whatever the decision is, and we'll vote on the amendment up or down, and whatever comes out.
In discussion of the how it's in the agenda. Like, should we be able to all discuss that first?
No, because you got to address the amendment first.
So
and then you go back to what the final bill looks like.
Lauren? Somebody.
It's just a simple matter of process.
Yeah.
All right. Seems more complicated than it needs to be.
Okay, so we're in discussion on the proposed amendment to remove the item of temporary chairman. My thoughts is I'm okay with that. I mean, look, this is obviously a very important committee. And we did specifically say that in the charge that the chairman is elected. The temporary chair was just to be organizationally provide some sort of platform, because none of these people have ever met themselves. That's why in the past the board has appointed chairs, but I don't want this to be a contentious issue. So if you, I mean, if this is if you feel this is significant that we need to remove that, I'm okay with it. And so I would then support your amendment. That's my view. Scott, I know you have different, so go ahead and open up with your comments.
I'm not sure I care and feel that strongly about it. I just like the fact that that we've had precedent of selecting a chair in the past. So the word temporary chair, I think, implies the fact that it's for the first meeting. We've said it's for the first meeting, and then they would elect a chair. So I guess I don't feel strongly about it one way or the other. I don't think it's a big deal.
I don't think we should have a tug of war over this. This was originally my thought. For some reason, I'm often the selectman who's in the room when a new committee is formed or first comes together. And I've observed in the past how awkward it is when our appointees don't know each other. And the first item on the first meeting's agenda is to select a chair. And it's often a rather awkward moment. So I made this suggestion because I think we actually do the committee members a favor, but this is not worth having a tug of war over this morning. And so, Bruce, I'm happy to go along with your amendment.
May I just add, I know in the past I remember when we set up the Energy Committee, we handpicked a chairman. And I know we've done it other times too, but I wasn't here when you folks did the ordinance. Is anything addressed about a chairman and any of the work you did? That's what I'm wondering about.
No, the ordinance says that as all boards and commissions that they elect a chair, and that's usually the first order of business when a board or commission meets. But the idea here was just to have, because this is a new one, right? This isn't like an existing board, to create, an organizational format to have the meeting run. And so that was the thinking. So,
but guys, we're talking out of both sides of our mouth, because at the end of the day, we just created the school building committee and we selected Graham as the chair. So
but that was in the charge. That was in the charge.
Is there anything you've done previously with this committee that would make this an issue?
This is a new committee.
No, this is
but you've written about this committee. You've taken action on this committee prior to me being here. Is there anything that was said then or done then? Does it address the chairman selection?
Well, just the ordinance and just the ordinance. But I think, listen, I appreciate everybody's consideration. Since we seem to have consensus, I would call the question on the amendment.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just move.
Okay, so it sounds like all in favor of in favor of the amendment made by Bruce, removing temporary chairman from the appointments, say aye.
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 Nay. I'm going to vote nay on it.
Okay. There you go. Now, do we have to withdraw the first motion?
No, we're not just voting
because we did it as an amendment. So
as amended, you would say.
Okay. As amended. So discuss and take action to approve appointing the members to the Ethics Commissions as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. We so rarely have to work through these things. So, well, and I just also want to say thank you so much for, people stepping up. And we got a lot of applications. We had a lot of great people, and I'm excited to meet each of the members of the commission at one point, but just really great to see, the community rallying around this and getting it moving going forward. So thank you very much for that. Next item on the agenda is a motion to approve the following appointments and resignations. The appointment of Ann Loss to the Inland Wetlands Agency alternates for a term to expire January 1st, 2024. Appointment of Andrew Wood to the Economic Development Commission for a term to expire January 1st, 2023. The resignation of Tina
No, it's adding.
Shizkowski.
No, it's
Or-
not resignation. It's adding her.
Sorry, appointment. Oh, there's no term on it. Appointment of Tina Shizkowski as an alternate to the new elementary school building committee. The resignation of Shane Kukaruta from the Beach and Rec Department Commission. It should say resignation of Peter Roos from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the resignation of Marilyn Shaw from the Coastal Resiliency Committee. I get a second.
Second
with our thanks and regret for the appointments and the resignations.
Okay,
the
great.
combo platter today.
All right, great. All right, thanks. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, and welcome to our new volunteers, and thank you for all the service to the town. Next item on the agenda is I do not have that with me. So
I didn't see any, so I think it's 0.
Yep, there are none.
Okay, great. So with that, then I think we can once again get a motion to we have to do public
Some
comment.
comments.
Please. So do we have any more public comment?
There's a lot. There's a hand up.
Okay.
Hi, it's Linda Moreno again from 145 Middle Beach Road. I just wanted to point out to address Aaron Mannix's comment about the silence in the regulations regarding short-term rentals. Our regulations actually do provide in section 2.1 that that no land, building, or premises or part thereof shall hereafter be used except as permitted or required by the zoning regulations or by the subdivision regulations. So our zoning regulations actually say, unless it's permitted, it's not permitted. So that's sort of the opposite of what Aaron Mannix was saying earlier. And I believe that under the regulations, short-term rentals are not permitted because transient lodgings are very much spelled out in specific sections of the regulations for bed and breakfast, hotels and motels. And as stated in our letter, it's completely illogical that you would control bed and breakfast, hotels and motels, but allow the unfettered use of houses for essentially hotel and motel uses. And it is a real burden on the community. It's not a noise ordinance, doesn't address this at all. It's your sense of community. It's having transients around you all the time. It's a sense of security. It's just none of us moved to Madison to live near a hotel and a motel. And that's essentially what we're burdened with.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Any more public comment?
Hello.
Any other members of the public who have public comment? Okay.
Hi, this is Mateusz Cieślak at 17 Taxis Road. First of all, thank you very much for your decisions regarding the ethics committee. Thank you for that. And I will probably echo some of the earlier comments here regarding the short-term rentals, but please bear with me for a moment. I strongly oppose the minimum 30-day rental regulation proposal. As outlined in my letter to the board, such proposal is a wrong tool to use to minimize disturbances to the local population, and there are 3 possible unintended consequences of this proposal. Such a regulation will not guarantee that people renting for 30 days will behave themselves and will still leave the residents and the local police force without any tools to fight against noisy or unruly residents. If we truly want to minimize the disturbances, I think we should instead enforce a noise ordinance and require the renters to be of certain minimum age. I was suggesting in my letter 30 to 35-year-olds, which I think are much less likely to throw a loud party in the area. Now, the 3 problems this proposal will create are, number 1, there will be a supply shortage of vacation accommodations. So this would likely create a market for a new hotel in the area. Whether Madison would approve it or not, that's a different case, but it could be Guilford, could be Clinton, could be other surrounding towns. And I don't think this is the intention of the proposal, and such hotel could be even more disturbing to the local residents. The second problem, the home affordability issues and potential for declining real estate prices. Many current residents can afford their homes due to their supplemental short-term rental income. I think this proposal would most likely kill the short-term rental market and will cause an exodus of homeowners from the town, negatively impacting real estate prices. The third problem this would potentially create is a negative impact on small businesses. We need to think about impact on other small businesses in the area that often rely on the additional revenue from seasonal visitors. Unless we're building a new hotel in Madison, Connecticut that can fill the gap in supply for seasonal rentals after the minimum 30-day rental requirements put in place, year-round businesses like bars, restaurants, and stores downtown will definitely feel the impact on the revenues and operations. And seasonal businesses, as you know, we have quite a few of those in the town as well. These may go out of business altogether. The one more thing I also wanted to point out, this is to Erin's point regarding institutional investors buying up entire neighborhoods across the country. I think killing the short-term rental market in Madison, Connecticut could rather reduce the home affordability for average resident in the town. This could result in exodus of homeowners and create a void or gap that could be exploited by institutional investors. In other words, what I'm trying to say is a short-term rental regulation could attract these investors to Madison instead of actually preventing them from entering in here, because we will create a gap. There will be a bunch of new homes or residences being put out on the market by residents who simply cannot afford to live here any longer because the short-term rental market has been killed by this particular regulation or ordinance. And then lastly, I'll finish up in literally 5 seconds. Just to Scott's point, I think there's a need to regulate to reduce the noise and other disturbances. And as I understand, this is the problem we're trying to solve for. But this is not the right tool to use. A noise ordinance and minimum age requirement for short-term renters, or a fine/penalty system for property managers and homeowners with multiple complaints, I think that will be more effective, and at the same time will increase the home ownership affordability for an average Madison resident. And with that, thank you all for your attention to this.
Thank you very much, and thank you for stepping up for the Ethics Commission. I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
Oh no, don't worry at all. That's that's a daily occurrence. It's a tough one.
Yeah. All right. With that, I know we have some other hands raised, and just a reminder to keep your comments to 2 minutes if possible. Okay. You can unmute yourself, Laura.
Hi. Zoning regulations give reasonable
Need your address first, Laura.
145 Middle Beach Road. So zoning regulations give reasonable consideration to the most appropriate use of land in commercial and residential zones, with the intent to limit the negative impact of the commercial zones on the residential zones. And while freedom is important, individual freedom, we have regulations for the greater good of the community, and I think they should be enforced. I appreciate Erin's research into this issue, and I think the residency requirement would, if we allowed short-term rentals with a residency requirement, that would cover all of those with supplement apartments and guest cottages. And that would be the first 2 people that spoke. And then the third person that talked about freedom to rent his house, he was on Boston Post Road. The lots there and north of the Post Road are much larger than the lots south of the Post Road, where we're most impacted by short-term rentals. So if you considered an acreage requirement, that might help, those on the post road and north of the post road, while protecting those of us that live on such small lots where we're heavily impacted by the activities of our neighbors. And a third idea, which I don't know if it's been tried, but we do have different zones in town. So if many of us in this zone, Middle Beach, Seaview, where we are on very small lots, don't want these rentals, but in Hammonasset, where these little cottages have been rented by the week, if that zone wants them, or if North Madison, where they have very large lots, if that zone wants them, or even Neck Road, if they want them, maybe you could consider, some sort of vote by zone, because we do have very small lots here. And
I will have to we're beyond, well beyond the 2 minutes, Laura, and I appreciate your comments. So we'll just move on, because we are hitting some walls here with different board members that have other commitments. So I'd like to allow an opportunity for the other people to speak who have their hands raised, and please try to keep it under 2 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, am I on?
Yep. Yes, you are.
Oh, hi, this is Dan Miller from 15 Sunset Road. I'll keep my comments very brief. First of all, thank you guys for all the effort that you put into this and other issues for the betterment of the town. Much appreciated. I just want to make a small point. I'm in opposition to a 30-day ordinance. I'm not in opposition to finding common ground on both sides. I think there actually is quite a large, what I've learned from this meeting is there's actually a large section that I think people could agree on. We want to prevent this from becoming some giant LLC community where faceless corporations are renting the homes. We want to keep neighbors happy and keep it private. All those things I think everyone would agree with. And then as you move forward, I just wanted to make one point about issues in general, which is kind of data versus anecdote. I'd like to see what the data is. It seems to me that the complaints mostly are based on the hotel and the club, and those are resolved. And there doesn't seem to be a basis of complaints about other tenants. And I don't want to minimize people's particular issues, but I do think the responsibility is to look at the whole and see what's the best for the community. And I think all my other points have been made by other people much more eloquently than I would make currently. So I'm in support of moving forward and finding common areas to solve some of the issues, and I'm opposed to a 30-day ordinance. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for your comments. Next member of the public, you can please state your name and address.
Hi, my name is April Allen, and I'm on 23 East Wharf Road. My main complaints with the short-term rentals is the traffic issues. There's a lot of turning around in my driveway, parking on the streets, and especially during the summer months when everybody has their lawn mowing services out and their, other services are being done. And basically strange cars, thefts, and a lot of coming and going in smaller neighborhoods and in tighter areas. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comment. I think we have one or two more hands raised.
I just wanted to, it's Christina Seeley from 32 Texas, just briefly, because one of the things that I saw in Aaron's presentation that I thought was something that me as an owner who is for short-term rentals would be willing to accept as well is the occupancy rate. If you look at, I think it's 2 heartbeats per bedroom. I think that would help cut down the amount of people that can rent. I know for me, I limit it anyway to that. And I don't allow parties, and that's part of my Airbnb rules. So if there is a party and if there's an ordinance or a citation, I can use Airbnb's legal help to go after those tenants. So it does give us some recourse. 1, to have an ordinance. 2, to have an occupancy limit, I think would help. And so those would be the 2 things that I definitely think we should look at. And I think there's a lot of common ground there. I don't think anybody wants 30 people renting their house. We don't want it turning into the parties, that we see on social media at the Hamptons. And I think having that sort of occupancy limit would definitely help us in limiting a lot of the problematic issues that we've been seeing.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we have one more hand raised, it looks like. State your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Liz Colby. I live at 4 Maple Avenue in Madison. I've been a resident of Madison for 42 years. The first 9 years I lived on the Post Road just west of the West Cemetery. So issues of development have been in my awareness now for 42 years. It's affected my life here. I think this whole issue of short-term unregulated rentals is the greatest threat to the quality of life and to the integrity of our neighborhoods that I have seen in 42 years. And I think we have got to have some ordinances or regulations, because it's not just about one party making a lot of noise. In a neighborhood where you don't like to call the police on your neighbors, the reason we're in a neighborhood is so we can talk to them. The issue is having 2 and 3 day rentals. You may have a party every weekend to deal with. You may have traffic every weekend, every 2 or 3 days. And I know personally people who have rented homes on Middle Beach Road, the Schumann residence, and they're 60 years old. They're not just 30 years old, 60 years old to celebrate an event. They have large groups every day of the week. They're there. So this is just creating a hotel motel community out of our neighborhoods. And I don't know, I know there aren't going to be police reports. There aren't going to be those kinds of statistics. So what's the best way to communicate with you some of these issues?
All right, well, thank you very much for your comments. And I think, once again, we've gotten a lot of emails with suggestions and recommendations. So certainly submitting in writing is really helpful to the board. And those are shared with the town planner in terms of ideas and suggestions. And we will certainly take full value and weight in investigating all those different ideas as we go through our further discussion. And I think we have still 2 more hands raised. So with that, I will move on to the next person.
Hello, am I here?
Yep.
Oh, it's Paul Wertheim again from 321 Horse Pond. And I just would like to thank all of you for addressing this issue. I know you guys have your volunteers, most of you, and you know, this is taking a lot of time out of your professional lives. So I just appreciate, you know, the way we're addressing this. And I think it's an important issue to address. And I think there is somewhere in the middle where we can all meet and everyone will be happy. So I look forward to continuing in this discussion. Thank you all.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I think we have one more hand raised. Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Annette Berry, and my husband Dan Miller spoke before. I live down on 15 Sunset Road. And the thing that makes me a little bit anxious about this, as somebody who my family has been coming to Madison since the 30s, actually maybe even the 20s. Anyway, my grandparents grew up in New Haven, and they would always come to Madison as a summer place. It was a different population, right? There was always rentals. It was much more of a summer place. And now it's more year round, which I appreciate, and I love the growth of the town. However, if they hadn't been able to come to Madison and rent and visit the town for a week at a time, sometimes 2 weeks at a time, we wouldn't have gotten to know Madison. We wouldn't have invested in Madison. We have been owners of property in Madison and various places for over 60 years. And we move around, and sometimes we rent, and sometimes we own. And then since we've been coming here, our family has grown. My brother owns property here. We have other friends who have come to the neighborhood. And without that experience and without that ability to come and stay, we wouldn't have joined the community. And I do feel like I'm afraid that there's a sort of closing the door behind this house policy that's starting to come in. And that makes me really nervous because that's not the community that my family and other families have loved for so long. And so I feel a sense a bit of danger. So I would love to figure out how to find a balance for the future and for my children and for other children to come to the community and share it and enjoy it. And I appreciate your time, really. Thank you so much for hearing all of this. This must be a lot for you. But thank you so much. And thanks for hearing me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your comments. And it looks like we have one more hand raised, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, hello. I think that's me, Nick Seaweed, 32 Texas Road in Madison. First thing I just want to say is I find it very refreshing to see the Republicans on the committee to take a more pro-regulation stance versus typically we see that coming from the Democratic side. So I think there's some good balance that's going on here, and I love the conversation around what's taking place. The second thing is we do have a Airbnb rental. We also rent long-term. We rent for the full summer. We rent for months at a time. I think we need to separate what we're seeing from the summer influx of individuals from what is being the root cause, which some people are saying it's the short-term rentals. I think what Dan Miller said is poignant, that we need to actually have some data around this. This isn't just emotion. I think we have some people who are new to town, they're coming from out of town, New Yorkers that have bought properties. They're not necessarily getting what they thought they were getting. They see some of the other individuals that they're not used to rubbing elbows with in the community. And let's look at the data. Take emotion out of it. We understand there's localized issues in certain areas. We can't create blanket policies around some localized issues. We need to actually understand the data behind it. These car break-ins that have been taking place, we can't necessarily equate this to the short-term rentals either. This, in many instances, from the police that I've talked to, are local residents, kids of family members in town that are breaking into cars. Yes, we do have people coming in from out of town, but those aren't short-term rentals either. Those are kids from New Britain and from New Haven that are coming in and stealing cars and kind of becoming a nuisance to our community. So let's really isolate what the issues are, separate them from the emotion and whatever your political stances are, and let's come to some sort of solution as a town to figure out what the best path forward is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate all the public coming out to today's meeting, which was a long one. And like I said, there'll be further opportunity to share people's ideas and reflections and suggestions to the board. You can always email to bos@madisonct.org. And we've received comments from members of the public, and I encourage you to keep those forthcoming. And with that, I guess, can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there. All right, bye-bye.